I'm Ted. Welcome to another Skoolie video, and today we're going to tackle the steps here on Katie's short bus. Okay, we got some rust issues here, and I think probably based on I've seen several of these short buses, this side hits a curb or hits something and then opens up a gap in here, and then it causes all that to rust, I'm guessing. But this bottom post is rusted out, this step where it connects here, and there's a hole over here where the old light was, although I don't even see a wire, so I'm not sure if there's a light even there. And I'll show you some rust up in there. So we've got to do some patching. All right, so I think the first thing I'm going to do is tack this hole here, and mostly because I think it's probably the least consequential, and so it's good practice on this one. I think that's just a little bit more structural over there, and I need to make sure that my skills are a little bit dialed in. And to be clear here, I'm not a welder, I'm not a metal worker at all. I'm much better with wood, but I'm just kind of learning. So I did do a couple practices for the welder here, just to figure out kind of what the settings were. I think I've got those on. I've got this patch that I've cut, and I'm going to try to get that patch in there. So I'm going to do a little bit more grinding to sort of smooth that out, and then we'll see if we can get that in there. Alright, so I'm going to try a technique modified. I found on YouTube a guy, Fitzy's Fabrications, and he's incredible. He's from Newfoundland, does a lot of fabrication and fixing of the rusty stuff. So really an incredible artist, really, in the stuff that he does. And what he tries to do in his is he will tack weld a piece onto there and then cut at a 45-degree angle around this, and then knock out the old piece. That way you don't have to fit it perfectly. I mean, I drew a line just as a reference, but to try to cut that out perfectly and then fit it in there without gaps is really hard. So I just cut one line that I can sit in there, and then knocked out that corner so I can sit that corner in there so it's flush, and then I'll tack weld it and then cut around it and weld it in is the theory. But like I said, I'm not really a welder, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, now I'm going to try to cut this, got it tacked in the bottom. I'm going to try to cut this top corner so I can press that all the way in flush. This is a very delicate work. It's tough too that with this angle. Probably should take this off, but I don't really want to. Fitzy says cut at a 45-degree angle. If you cut it flush, then you leave a gap for the kerf of the blade, but if you cut it at an angle, at 45-degree angle, there's much less space and it fits a lot tighter. Alright, now I've got that top corner cut out. You can push it in and tack it in place. Alright, so there it is. It looks really ugly. But Fitzy says, the gospel according to Fitzy, and I say that with no sense of irony at all. The guy's amazing. But he says, especially with sheet metal, you got to kind of spot weld it and go around, because if you try to draw long beads on the thin metal, it will tend to melt through. So, in a combination of that, and also I couldn't get the steep enough angle just because it's sort of in place here, so I still had a bigger gap, so I had to, tack, and keep going around and around and around to fill it in. But I'll let it cool, and then I'll grind it down, look for some pinholes, and seal it up. Again, this is going to be covered by something, so I don't really care what it looks like, honestly, but I just want it more solid than it was. So let's turn our attention over here. Okay, so I cut this post out. And Went down, some friends of mine down the road, car dealership, have a brake that they graciously let me use, so I bent up some 14 gauge steel here and kind of cut it to the specs. And so I'm going to tack that on like that and start that way, and then we'll work our way over to the stairs. Okay, I can't say that is even close to pretty, but I ground it down. Actually, only a couple of pinholes. Went back, filled those in, and ground them down again. And so, at least I would say it is a lot more solid than it was before. Like I said, we're going to cover it up with something there, so it doesn't have to be pretty. So, kind of bouncing back and forth. Do one thing, let it cool, go back to the other side, kind of go back and forth. So. Let's go back over here. Okay, so welded this bottom piece on. It's pretty solid for a non-welder. And now I've got this piece. Again, my good friends down the auto place. We bend this. It's 14 gauge steel, and so I put it in here and drew lines. Like I said, the challenge is, if I try to cut it out ahead of time, it's going to be tough to fit exactly. It's going to be bigger gaps. But it's also tough to cut in here. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to try to cut, I guess, those corners out. And then maybe the top. And then I can fit this in, weld it. And I should be able to get a better angle at cutting that bottom step off. Oh, this is hard for me. Oh, keep plugging away. I think I used about every tool I own to try to get that out. So, of course, found more stuff underneath there. I haven't figured out how I'm going to patch that yet. Alright, continuing to make progress here. So I tack welded this in the spot, and now I'm going to try to cut at that 45-degree angle across here so I can set that down in there and make it flush. This is the hard part, because it seems like if you don't have the angle right, you leave too big of a gap and it's hard to fill. So this is where metalwork is hard for me. Let's see how it goes. It's not pretty, but it seems to be holding up. Some spots actually is not too bad. I got not a big gap, but I got some bigger gaps that are hard to fill in just because the metal's thin and it kind of blasts through it. So a friend of mine told me about a trick about putting a coat hanger in there as a spacer and welding that in there. So I may try that. I got some gaps here and some gaps over here, and then that back corner. And then this kind of corners have got some gaps, so I just gotta fill it in and grind it. Like I said, I guess it's not not too worried about how it looks really, because I can grind it down. Plus, it's all gonna be covered up anyway. I just want it to be strong and watertight. So I guess I'll keep filling in and see how it goes. So my strategy here to try to compensate for my bad welding skills and metalwork skills, to cut these little tiny shims here. And any place I've got a gap that's hard to fill in, I've just been kind of welding those in place. And then I'll go back and grind them off, and hopefully it'll be all filled with metal. So fit that in there. I know where it's going to go. Like that. Get a magnet underneath to hold it in the right spot. I think. Maybe. Okay, so this is possibly the ugliest welding in the history of welding. So, but it seems to be solid. I don't see any pinhole lights through there. I filled it in. So what I'll do is I'll grind it down, check for any pinholes, and then put another bead down if I need to. But it seems to be pretty strong, and it's better than it was. So we'll take that, and we can grind everything up or flap disc it or whatever, and then cover it up with something that looks prettier. All right, so I think I've got it almost as good as it's gonna get. Ground it down, and then it came out at nighttime and actually shined a flashlight up through to identify some pinholes, which is good because there's more there than I could actually see before. So found the pinholes, filled them in, ground it back down again. So then of course it rained and it kind of rusted up a little bit and had to grind it down. So some of the spots it's hard to get into the corners. I'll probably put some OSFO or some sort of rust converter in it. What did I use before? I forget what I used before, but it worked pretty good. And then paint them up so that, again, they'll be protected from moisture, and then ultimately cover them up. So, again, it's not pretty, but, and again, I guess my biggest fear is that hit some sort of bump and it all falls apart. So, hard telling, not knowing. So we'll just have to keep, I guess if that happens, you just fix it. So certainly a lesson in, again, figuring it out as you go. And like I said, philosophically, I suppose if you're converting your own bus, it's a learning experience, and you hopefully come away with some skills. And like I said, trying to develop my metal skills a little bit better, it's because it's not as good as my wood skills, which might not be great either. But it's holding up. So like I said, if any of you guys out there who really do know what you're doing, feel free to throw some comments and some suggestions in there, because I got a lot more to do in the bus inside of the floor, and try to take care of all the rust out there. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all those things that you do, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.